and so on. Georgia Verdier, thanks so much. By the way, what we do is we have everybody speak for a couple of minutes, then we go back to each person and then have discussion. So that's how we do it on Political Pundit Night. This is the 25th Political Pundit Night on mytwintears.com. Next is the Reverend Lorri Thornton. She's pastor of the Friendship Baptist Church in Corning, and that's a great church in the area. I hope all of you have been to the Friendship Baptist Church or will go. So at this point, Reverend Lorri Thornton, your views on racism in America and the Twin Tiers. Pastor Thornton.
Good evening, everyone. And Dr. Coleman, thank you so much for this platform. I'm excited to be a part of your silver show, so I feel special. So once again, thank you for the opportunity. And to follow such an eloquent speaker like Georgia Verdier is very intimidating. But racism is something that I can speak on day in and day out. We are a far cry from the more perfect union that the forefathers had in mind. Back in 2020, we experienced the pandemic, COVID-19, but for people of color, that was a second pandemic for us. We've dealt with the pandemic of racism for years, some spoken about, some unspoken, but we've dealt with it for years. And yes, there's progress that has been made, but a far cry from where we need to be. And the way to tackle it is to do what you're doing tonight, Dr. Coleman, is to have those conversations and to educate and try and help people understand what it feels like to be in our shoes, to see it, to hear it, to recognize it, and to have other people treat it as normal. And we understand that sometimes it is normal because it's happened that way for so long and it's just every day. So we've come to a point now where it's time to change your everyday routine. If we want to be this more perfect union, we've got to become a more perfect people. And that is by understanding our differences and drawing from those differences, creating a better union from those differences. And we do it by starting things like this and then begin to branch out, the systematic racism, institutional racism, all of those places where we experience it. Let's start digging at the root cause of it and tearing it down, not just talk about it, but let's be about the work.
Thank you, Pastor Thornton. It's appreciated. Georgia Verdier made a good point that racism is taught. It's in America's DNA. It's always been in America's DNA, but it is taught. And hopefully at some point things will change. I think with the younger generation, I think there's less racism than with the older generations, but I could be wrong, but I think the younger generation, there's more interaction between different races and different ethnic groups. And I think that's a real positive thing. Next up on this, the 25th, silver. I have silver here. This is the silver anniversary of Political Pundit Night, the Silver Political Pundit Night, number 25. Tom Santulli, former Chemung County executive, and now a major commentator on NBC in New York, WETM 18. Tom Santulli.
Well, Dr. Coleman, first I thought you would probably sing respect that Aretha Franklin sang to kick the shit up. Listen, you can't deny that racism still exists. I mean, you have to live on the moon not to know it, and it's unfortunate, but it's still here. And but I hope that we can at least agree that we have made a lot of progress over time, and that certainly the attitudes of 100 years ago and 50 years ago and what they are today, the way we do interact, the way that we do talk to each other, racism is something that a lot of people are very, very uncomfortable in talking about. We mentioned that earlier, but it's just something, I can't say it. I can't say what I think. If I say it, it'll be misrepresentative. I'm going to get in trouble, and that's the thing that drives me the most crazy, is the fact that we just can't have an intelligent conversation when we talk about these issues. You know, I keep looking back to and I'm in my early 70s, that when Dr. King was preaching and all of us watched it and only could imagine what a person like that went through as they marched through the streets with everyone together and what was going on and the riots that we've experienced over the years. Dr. King, despite all that, and I really think it was just such a lesson to be learned, is he believed in bringing people together, even through the worst of times. He never gave up on that principle of, if we can't talk to each other, if we can't work together, you're never good. Unlike today, where I think there's a lot of people that are starting to try to drive us apart again, that this becomes very political. It becomes nasty. It becomes that we can't have that conversation anymore. And I just think it's so important that we go back to the days of how Dr. King did things. He just believed so much that if we can't come together, we'll just never resolve this if we can't be honest with each other. And I do. And I got to go back in time and look, you know, when Barack Obama became president, you know, he did not just have black people that voted for him. He was well liked and had 2 terms, and he was popular, and he was very intelligent, and he left his mark. And we had our first woman black vice president. You know, those things would have been unheard of years ago. So I think there's progress to be made, and there's still a lot more progress to be done. But if we can't remember what we've done together and where we've been and where we are, and knowing that there's work to do, the conversation must continue. And I think we just need to make sure that people aren't afraid, that we have to really, I think, inspire people not to be afraid to sit down and have this conversation. You know, the word racism can be used, and I will end with this, I think is used incorrectly. If I disagree with somebody over something that is not what we're talking about, human relations, we use sometimes the word racist for somebody who doesn't agree with us about climate change. You know, that word takes a problem, a special problem, the fact that what transpired in this country for hundreds of years, that was wrong, and it was discouraging and disgusting, and it's unacceptable. So I just hope we can again have an intelligent conversation without being offensive.
Well, that's what this is about. RESPECT, Tom Santulli, respect the Aretha Franklin standard. Let's have a respectful discussion about racism in America and the Twin Tiers. You know, I remember years ago, I taught a course at Rutgers University, and the course was on urban politics, and the subject was the police. And half the class was white, and the other half was black. And so I asked the students, what has been your experience with the police? And every black student said it had been a negative experience. One African-American student said, I come from a wealthy family, I have a nice car, and I go home on weekends from Rutgers University, and oftentimes I'm stopped by the police, and they say, where'd you get the car? You know, and you know, he was getting the 3rd degree. So the black students had one experience with the police, and the white students had another experience. So the white students, the police were there to serve and protect, and the white students saw the police in a very positive light. So totally different experiences in terms of black and white. And that's why it's important for folks, whether white or black, to talk to each other, to communicate with each other. That's one thing that Jerome Emanuel has mentioned on Political Pundit Night. It's important to communicate, to talk to one another. And that's one of the things that's really important, I think, in terms of overcoming racism and ignorance is communication.